Senhor Presidente da República e Senhor Ministro da Marinha, oficiais e soldados, gente do Minho e de Portugal. Faz hoje 10 anos, nesta mesma cidade, às ordens de Gomes da Costa, o otimismo e valentia quase não eram virtudes, porque brotavam espontaneamente da alma, como exigência da própria natureza. O exército português desencadearam um movimento triunfante, sem luta, glorioso, sem sangue, porque na verdade a vosso comando foi apenas a expressão militar de uma ordem irresistível da nação. E começou a nova era. Eis agora o que se passou. As almas dilastradas pela dúvida e o negativismo do século, procuramos restituir o conforto das grandes certezas. Não discutimos Deus e a virtude. Não discutimos a pátria e a sua história. Não discutimos a autoridade e o seu prestígio. Não discutimos a família e a sua moral. Não discutimos a glória do trabalho e o seu dever. Assim se assentaram os grandes pilares do edifício e se construiu a paz, a ordem, a união dos portugueses, o Estado forte, a autoridade prestigiada, a administração honesta, o revigoramento da economia, o sentimento patriótico, a organização corporativa e o império colonial. Senhores, findam hoje 10 anos que constituíram na história pátria apenas uma era de restauração. Vão começar outros 10 que hão de constituir uma era de engrandecimento, a erguer-se sobre mais duros sacrifícios, mais altos heroísmos e mais seguras dedicações. Não desejavem ir aqui sem saber quem tem coragem para nos acompanhar. Vamos!
No?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, I believe it works. Yeah, all right. Check out the video streams so you can see if
Yeah, it looks like it's working.
see if like there's any audio issues.
Yeah, it's working.
All right. So hello everybody. Welcome to the first episode of the second season of the Rightcast. I'm here with my guests Clossington and Charlemagne. And today I guess the topic.
Hello.
Oh, actually, yeah. Before I get into the topic, I'll let each of you introduce yourself, starting with Clossington.
Do you want like something like an overview of my channel or ideology or something like that?
Yeah, go. Yeah, whatever fits you best.
Well, I mostly come from something of a paleo-libertarian background, but I went down the pipeline and now I'm something of a neo-reactionary. And my channel's somewhat up and coming, and I'm just glad to be here.
All right, Charlemagne.
Yeah, so I come from well, my background isn't exactly neo-reactionary, but that's where I am now. And I would say neo-reactionary is the best way to describe me at the moment in terms of pretty much my views on everything, be it from economics to organizing. So people probably know my channel if they're watching. I just did a few videos on bioleninism, which were actually really successful and popular, so pretty happy with that. I'll be releasing the next one in that series, hopefully in the next week or so. I'm working on the script for that one now, and it's coming along pretty nicely.
Yeah, so I guess the topic right now is, I guess the American system, and how I think it has a lot of advantages, at least for our ends, compared to, say, Europe, because, first of all, so I guess the first thing we talk about is how U.S. law is set by precedent versus Europe.
Yeah.
So I'll let Charlemagne start out with it.
Yeah, well, that basically describes how the legal system in the United States has worked, especially since FDR's administration, when the Supreme Courts were packed as hard as he possibly could with progressive judges. I mean, we have this concept from Moldbug called the living constitution, which is to say the U.S. is now governed by, as opposed to a set of laws that are actually written down, it's governed by precedents set by Supreme Court judges that, although they're technically not law themselves, the judges tend to treat them as if they're ironclad. And essentially what we've ended up with is precedent built on precedent, built on precedent, all in the direction of progressivism. And this is a big problem because it's gotten quite out of sync with the, I guess, paleoconservative position that Clossington iterated earlier. And the modern body of law in the United States really has nothing to do with the Constitution at this point. And sadly, the Constitution really is kind of just a piece of paper. It's actually good for us in some ways.
All right. Yeah.
I mean, quite similarly, I guess I kind of fall in line with the idea that something within the Anglo common law legal system of pervasive, it's riddled with pervasive error, anywhere from I guess the first Mabe versus Madison case all the way back in the early 1800s. But then, I mean, I guess, is there any sort of opposition to Mabe versus Madison and the role of common law in the United States? No, it's not really there, but it's extremely broad and open enough to allow for distant strains of precedent to be built up, I guess.
Yes, and also, Charlemagne and I, we've talked about how occasionally, let's say a local district or Supreme Court issues an injunction. Like, let's say a state or a town is, I don't know, some town in North Dakota decides to ban abortion, and some state or federal level judge issues an injunction or something saying, hey, you can't do that. Try to ignore them. It wouldn't be good optically to send in, like, federal agents to arrest the people who voted on that. You know?
Yeah, and that has to be done very carefully, but I think one of the potential ways in which we could conceivably incrementally work our way out of this problem of the living constitution that doesn't involve some sort of revolution, which obviously wouldn't really be good, I think most people would agree on that, is to selectively and tactically not so much defy but ignore certain federal court and Supreme Court decisions. Good example of this in action recently that we did talk about was what was going down in Virginia with the local counties sort of refusing to recognize laws that were in obvious violation of the Second Amendment. And this is good not because I think that the Constitution itself or the Second Amendment is a particularly robust defense, but it's something that can be tactically deployed with a pretty ironclad defense against obviously illegitimate Supreme Court or federal court orders. I mean, the Second Amendment is pretty bent at this point, but still they can only push it so far. and there are certain opportunities that present themselves, like what happened in Virginia, for local governments to sort of the courts. And I mean, one thing about the federal courts and the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court doesn't really have a mechanism to enforce its decisions. So, these 9 old progressives can sit in there and rewrite the Constitution all they want, but at the end of the day, the enforcement of the law comes down with the executive. And, you have to recognize that the executive branch isn't going to send in on every little refusal, such as in Virginia, for example. If a county is simply saying it's not going to enforce a certain obviously unconstitutional federal order, the optics of sending in the feds to crack down on this local county in Virginia, the optics of there just work against the USG so much that it's unlikely for. And obviously there's still some risk involved when refusing the courts, but there are certain tactical opportunities should be exploited when possible.
Clossington, your take?
I mean, that's a fairly decent take, and I guess it's pretty well shown that smaller counties, especially like as we've seen in Western Virginia, have been able to fully take on this position. But
it's not
I
just
guess
Western Virginia, though. It's also everything in between, say, like Arlington and Richmond, kind of like a central part. But yeah.
But it goes both ways, though. Wherever we have, I guess, these Second Amendment sanctuaries, you also have these sanctuary cities, sanctuary counties, and sanctuary states for illegal immigrants in liberal strongholds. So it's not necessarily all in our favor.
Yes, although the thing is, if we shouldn't attempt to play fair if we were to like for example, let's say we will probably selectively, if let's say we had a right-wing executive, it would be in his interest to selectively enforce these sort of laws against sanctuaries for things that hurt the opposition. We're obviously not, if we were to let's say Charlemagne suddenly became the president of the United States. He probably killed himself from distress, but but he probably I don't see playing fair. Okay, we're gonna get rid of 2A sanctuaries and sanctuary cities. I don't see it as working. I mean, have either of you heard of the sort of website called the Washington Examiner?
I've heard of it.
They made sort of an argument that sort of legal precedent is dangerous and that we can't stoop to the lows the left goes to, and that's kind of like that mindset in general is kind of the reason why the right fails. You can't.
Yeah, well,
go ahead.
We were having a conversation in Discord earlier. I think you were present for some of it about Spygate, and basically acknowledging the fact that the intelligence agencies in the United States attempted an actual coup against the president of the United States and the ruling party that was completely unconstitutional and illegal. And this places us in really unprecedented territory in the United States, at least as far as we know. They literally attempted a direct overthrow of the elected president of the United States. And I think we have to recognize at this point that any semblance of fair play or legalism, that's all kind of just window dressing at this point over the real Machiavellian power. And that's something that needs to be embraced on the right and not fought against. There's a lot more utility in recognizing that the Constitution simply isn't an effective document at this point than trying to adopt some sort of position that would actually preserve it in any sense, because it is already completely destroyed.
The Constitution really, at this point, is only a means to an end. Once it's no longer needed, once we get our revolutionary, LARPing, neo-reactionary space imperium, we won't need that. I hate how the American right seems to think power isn't a vehicle and is instead the power of the state is the political spectrum itself. And it kind of, I know this is sort of a basic talking point, but I talked I asked some people on. There's a good subreddit who that brought it up called "Shit Neocons Say." They talk about sort of boomer conservatives and Charlie Kirk. And some guy was debating with someone, and he said, "Do you honestly think the medieval kings were left wing because they believed in big government?" And he said, and this boomer said yes. He also said that freedom matters more than order.
Yeah. See, this is something Thomas Carlyle points out, that freedom is the result of order, not the other way around.
So I think
I'm sorry. I just wanted to interject. Even the sort of standard conservative Edmund Burke line is that you need, I guess, you need virtue, and you need, I guess, a very conservative social apparatus before you can have, I guess, anything close to orderly freedom. So even within their ideology, it doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah, and I think the one issue within the dissonant right is that this is a bit unrelated, that we don't really have an end goal in mind. Like I'm working on a video about my second video in Statecraft, and basically what I did, I went into jfg.world, which I'll admit is somewhat of a cancerous Discord. I probably have stage 4 brain cancer from frequently browsing it. And I also went into NRX files, and I looked at I asked people what their end goal was, and we couldn't really come up with a sort of monolithic answer that everyone shared. Obviously, the end goal is the construction of a sort of reactionary, well, not neo-reactionary, but this reactionary can be used as just a term for wanting to return back to an earlier time period. So reactionary states to enforce our will. And when I
remember when you posed that question, and I did find it uncomfortably difficult to answer. I think we do have a problem envisioning anything regarding what we're actually trying to do. And I don't know if that means we need to specify our ideals more, or specify more well-defined short-term goals.
Yeah, and I think also some people keep in mind, the dissonant right, the game is rigged. Unless you're like really good at marketing your ideas, you're probably going to be labeled a neo-Nazi by most normies. So a lot of the people who can't really market their ideas well enough, they kind of like fall into a cycle of, okay, I failed in red pilling my parents and now they hate me, or my co-workers, family members, insert blank here. So therefore I cannot cause, and it's therefore I can't get any political change done, therefore there's no political solution, therefore I will have really shitty optics and make the cycle go on indefinitely.
This is something Renaissance Man actually mentioned on the stream I was just on with Settler's Lament, when we were talking about proselytizing Christianity, basically. That there is a failing on the part of the person trying to spread the ideas if people simply won't accept them. So we do need to figure out ways to actually effectively spread what we're trying to do, as opposed to just sort of blaming the normies for being too dumb.
Yeah, and also I think some degree of working covertly is also important. We can't be overt on everything. We can't. Populism in general usually tends to fail.
That's just the means, not like the core of the movement, I think.
Yeah, like
populism, that is.
I think actually one of the best ways to come up with sort of covert operations is to write stories, write political intrigue stories, and use the plot lines within them to some figure way to infiltrate the government. The Star Wars Revenge of the Sith was not a movie, it was a training manual for any...
I am coming more and more to that conclusion.
I mean, it's pretty funny how I think George Lucas was semi-red pill because Palpatine's like master was a banker, a subversive banker. I think I've heard this before, but
if I remember correctly, George Lucas based the story of the prequels around Dick Cheney and George Bush, with Dick Cheney being Palpatine and George Bush being Anakin. or something like that. I remember he said something.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. I know he's a Democrat, but and sort of a liberal of some sort. But there's an idea coming up with sort of fantastical scenarios or fantastical schemes can be fun, and it can work. Because keep in mind, the sort of agencies which are designed to keep people like you out, they aren't as smart as you think, and you don't need to be honest about your intentions. In fact, if any dissident right-winger runs for office, it's better to not be honest about your intentions. You know?
Yeah, I actually read this really interesting book recently called The Web of Subversion by James Burnham, author of The Machiavellians, which everyone here would probably know of at least. And it was written in 1954, I think, a really long time ago. And it basically documents the process that occurred in the first half of the 20th century of literal communist infiltration and subversion of high-level government agencies to an actual unbelievable degree. Like it's really mind-blowing the degree to which socialists actually, or communists, just took over government agencies and directed government policies in very serious ways in the first half of the 20th century, and as we know, into the second, well beyond the point at which the book was written. And I kind of actually came to the conclusion that we might need to look into more old school tactics in terms of actually organizing covertly. I mean, these people had really interesting rules of the underground. I mean, one of them is basically never leave a paper trail. Like in terms of how their cells were organized. There's literally no documentation that anyone was a party member or that anyone received any orders, that there was conspiracy whatsoever. And it might sound kind of goofy and James Bondish, but this kind of stuff actually is effective. I mean, there's a reason. This is the archetypal spy ring model, right? I mean, this is something we might need to consider having to do is if we actually get to the point we can organize in real life and not just talk on Discord and such. I think perhaps trying to follow this more old school model of IRL clandestine activity, as LARPy as it sounds, that actually might be necessary to perhaps run our own Gramscian operation against the cathedral.
I think that kind of operating isolated away from the public works. I'm thinking. I'm considering trying to become sort of a CEO or build my own sort of defense contractor company, because I think eventually this is a bit LARPy, but it could work if in the 2060s. Although the U.S. will probably collapse by then. But basically, the idea is that do you believe at some point in my lifetime, by the time I'm 90, 100 in the grave, that there will be some form of robot army somewhere in the world? This is completely serious, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, yes. There's almost no doubt. I mean, drones kind of already are that, right? They're piloted by humans, but it would be pretty easy to, just have an AI pilot the drones, if not to fire weapons to it, to at least follow enemy or potential enemy activity and patterns. And even, I mean, and I'm there with you, I can envision literal Terminator robots walking around 100 years from now, fighting battles or even policing this.
Well, the idea is
that that's entirely.
So I get a large arms company, and I contract the military, and I have a bunch of sort of soldier robots who look like HK-47. They don't call you a meatbag when you try to talk to them. That would be But basically, what I would do is I would put a backdoor into those robots that would let me control them remotely, and I can add contingency orders into it. Basically Order 66, except that the droids were...
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah. And then I could say, okay, I'm going to need you to arrest all government officials, and then, and I don't know, several major leaders of the cathedral, I guess, will be thrown in prison. But, imagine, 10 million sort of these robots just arresting government officials with a coup of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, the problem there is I don't know how you would actually get away with anything like that. I mean,
we have to shoot for the stars. We can't, we have to come up with some sort of cringe-inducing scenarios, because they might have some truth to them later on.
No, it depends on what kind of world you actually see developing. Like, I can see just about every future conflict devolving into just economic wars over inflation and trade deficits
And bringing
debt.
bringing butt sex to Botswana.
I mean, you can just see. I mean, isn't Trump already doing that kind of?
He's
trying to legalize homosexuality in Africa in order to improve trade.
Yes, the neoliberal imperium is the train that never stops. We will not stop until every country in the world has the right to rip a baby's head off 8 months into pregnancy. That's kind of how neoliberalism is. I think neoliberalism itself is sort of like ideological imperialism. You know?
Well, I'm more talking about neoconservatism, of sort of the Buckleyite or the sort of Buckleyite variety. Let's bring free. Let's have an empire of democracy, or was it empire of liberty an
empire of sort of really corrupt governments and McDonald's and highways and basically, and just making America, mini Americas in like the Middle East or some shit. I think that I'm surprised there hasn't been such a thing as such LGBTQ imperialism. So basically, having neoconservative foreign policy to enable trans rights in certain nations. I'm surprised nobody's come up with that. Like, imagine a warmongering progressive.
It's already in the making.
Yeah.
But like an overtly one, like a politician who says, "I am going to destabilize this nation and have a coup using the CIA to enforce trans rights."
I mean, I would say that the Iraq basically was that on its face in some sense. I mean, and all of the subsequent Middle Eastern wars. I mean, it's not exactly hidden. I mean, the whole neocon agenda was to spread liberal democracy to all of the other nations, and liberal democracy includes the LGBT agenda and whatnot. I mean, so they don't explicitly say that, but they come basically as close as they possibly can to. So I would say we're kind of already at that point, really, and we have been for most of our life.
Now, I think another issue we could bring up is trying to get into like medium-sized cities and counties and like trying to write the educational curriculum. Because even though the Department of Education does set a lot of standards for education from grade school, the local governments and state governments tend to have more of a say in that matter. So it's not, you don't have to be explicitly political, but imagine running like a ton of dudes and for the school board in like, I don't know, let's say decently sized right-leaning county. You think Collin County could work? Collin County, Texas. Charlemagne, I'm sure you might know about some of this.
Okay. You'd probably know more than me. I mean, pretty much, I mean, any county is a good place to do something like that, though. And I definitely possible. I mean, I've heard Academic Agent talk about the faculty meetings where they sort of plan out their curriculums and stuff. And there's a lot more opposition to the SJW stuff than you would think, generally, because academics like their freedom. And I think at a local level, especially if you can get parents involved, I mean, it'd probably be a lot easier than you think to sort of write the curriculums maybe in an under-the-table manner, in a way that subverts the government global homo education. I think that's a pretty good idea. I mean, this kind of goes along with what I was saying in terms of like covert ops. I mean, you wouldn't need that much. I mean, communists literally infiltrated almost the highest levels of the American government in a span of like 20 to 30 years in the first half of the 20th century, and then basically ruled it to final victory with, President Obama at the latest. And, so to do this at a local level would be trivial compared to that. I mean, you could probably in a couple of years basically control the school system to a significant degree if you could get the right people in there who were covertly of the same.
All right, we have a question from William Timothy Norman Johnson. Can I point something out? Are you guys talking in an intergenerational sense?
I mean, I guess by definition we are, since we're intergenerational. I'm not sure what that means specifically.
Like the idea that there's an intergenerational struggle of sorts.
I mean, I'm reading this interesting book right now called The Fourth Turning, which basically describes how a secular cycle, a sequence of basically hot awakenings, upheavals, or unravelings rather, and a crisis that occurs roughly every 80 years throughout human history in accordance with rise and fall of various generations in positions. So I mean, I think there's kind of an eternal generational series of struggle seems to happen in human history. I mean, nothing belongs to one generation. In every phase of a civilization, each generation is going to be in a different position and be contributing something different to that position.
Speaking of differences and contributions, I've noticed that within the dissonant right, a lot of people, especially in JFT that world, tend to focus on like one or two aspects of the fight that we're fighting right now. And I think what would work is we need to have specialized roles, like division of labor sorts for dissonant right subversion. Some people might have a lot of connections, some people might be charismatic smooth talkers, some people might be good at technology, that sort of thing. And I mean, some people obviously are going to have more connections because they're a bit older. I mean, and some people might work for like Peter Thiel or some shit, you know. I'm sure there's probably some reactionaries in Silicon Valley. I'm sure they're not open about it, but
oh yeah, I mean, Mencius Moldbug, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I agree. I recently read this book, a handbook for traditional living, and the second half talks about the formation of these operative units, which should be formed organically, and in the sense that people's levels in the hierarchy are automatically recognized by everyone. And I think definitely people have different skills and need to be allowed to and encouraged to use their particular skills in whatever way benefits us the most, and respected for that. And, you know, the people underneath them in the hierarchy need to respect that as well. And, you know, if you're at the top of the hierarchy and someone, you know, maybe better at smooth talking to politicians than you comes along, you need to respect the contribution they can make. And, you know, we need some sort of like a network, I guess, to connect all of this together, probably in the form of cells like the community. So, you know, I guess one common problem here is, you know, a lot of us become content creators and we have other skills, but we most leverage our time towards content creation. But
I mean, content creation is more of a hobby anyway. It's not like
it kind of is, yeah. So I think there's a big expectation in the community that I guess the content creators become sort of the leaders, which I think causes some problems because the content creators tend to just be sort of intellectual, political nerds and aren't necessarily the guys who should be leading some sort of political action. I mean, maybe some of us are, but some of us aren't, right? And we need people to sort of step into these roles organically and not have the expectation that, you know, every single person in the community somehow needs to be like leading a movement, because some of us aren't capable of doing it. Some of us don't want to do it.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, the people who are capable of doing that need to be doing it, and they might be in the audience, you know, not making videos, and that's fine.
I mean, I think I take something of a different position. I was talking with a distributist a little while ago, and I think he said something along the lines of politicians of the future should be able to speak on online, kind of like this, or at least this is a very, very good way of training future public speakers through content creation, through networking with other creators. Instead of using the traditional traditional means of gaining power and ascending the hierarchy. We create our own little hierarchies and our own little communities to kind of mock scale before tackling the big hierarchies IRL.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's a decent training mechanism, at least.
yeah. I think my role to play will probably be sort of the sort of cosmopolitan elite, but not a sort of shitlib. The reason being is because of the fact that, for instance, I come from old wealth. Like literally, my grandfather held a 100-year. When he held it, it was a 100-year-old southern plantation that went back to the 1800s. So I will try to get into an Ivy League school to like fulfill that. Didn't work, but I'm considering using some of my familial connections to meet some politicians. My family is friends with several of them. I believe my family was friends with the Byrd. You know who Senator Byrd was?
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Like my dad's father, he was personal friends with him, and I have a lot of connections with that. So I will be essentially the Shiev Palpatine of the dissonant right, in a sense.
I mean, those kind of connections are really useful to leverage, and I'm assuming at some point you'll come into some sort of inheritance as well, which is, I think one of the problems there is there are people on the right with money, not just billionaires, but just fairly well off, who would be willing to put money behind something that actually made any sense or was coherent. But I think there's no one wants to be the first guy to do that, right? And I think this is where bringing legitimate political movements come into play. Maybe something Fuentes is trying to do.
And by legitimate, we don't mean what Spencer did, where he invited Matthew Heimbach to retard rallies. I don't. I think this might seem like a burning a bridge, but I think a lot of people within the alt-right was the alt-right is a dead movement. I think we all know about that. But
yeah.
anyone who
everyone acknowledges.
A lot of people who still self-describe themselves as that, we might have to burn bridges with them. Not all of them, but some people like Strike and Mike. They don't seem. They seem to be a net negative.
Yeah, I would mostly agree with that. There's definitely a large crossover between the people who still use the term alt-right and the people who are kind of problematic. I mean, I hate to dead horse at this point, but Mark Collette, as everyone knows, recently has been in some controversy, and we don't like to punch right, but it's when you're going around, ironically or not, recommending Mein Kampf and getting photos taken with people with 1 million swastika tattoos, it's just like, well, what are you doing? We simply can't have this. And the book I read recently, A Handbook for Traditional Living from the European New Right, it goes into this. I mean, it flat out says that the toxic leaders, and it's probably explicitly referring to a few people we might know, need to simply be ejected from their positions because they're not worthy of those positions. And there are certainly a number of people in the movement that we need to treat that way, not because we have any particular vitriol against them, but just because they're not supposed to be there. They're not.
They're not helping us.
They're not real. They're not real.
Well, I mean, we want to push the Overton window, but optics are a thing.
And
we want to push it, and we don't want to push it into National Socialism.
Ironically, if we pushed it, if we had ultimate power, the Overton window will be pushed further right than, like, I don't know, Matthew Heimbach. I mean, I get it, he's a commie now, but back when he worked for the Traditionalist Workers' Party, he seemed. There's a lot of people who sort of like focus solely on race and not like traditionalism, to the point where they kind of become like racist liberals, like Spencer, for instance. I believe he unironically endorsed Bernie for a while. And
yeah, I think so.
I mean, he did did he ironically or unironically embrace Jeremy Corbyn on the grounds of anti-Semitism?
I think he may have unironically done that. I mean, he's the same guy who said homosexuality is the last stand of implicit white identity. So,
Oh dear.
Some things that, usually you wouldn't believe, I can't really apply that to Spencer. I never really give him the benefit of the doubt.
I mean, we all heard that leaked clip of him ranting after Charlottesville, and we can't have a guy like that leading anything. I mean,
he sounded quite effective.
It's simply a not.
He sounded quite effective, don't you think?
Yeah. And I mean, none of us, as far as I could imagine, would ever rant like that even in private, because we're higher level individuals than Richard Spencer, basically. I mean, the guy is just toxic.
To put it simply, we are on the right side of the bell curve. I mean, no, Richard Spencer is probably absurdly intelligent, but he's also like, it's not less to
right.
do.
No, he's certainly well educated and intelligent. It's more spiritually.
I think spiritually and personality wise, that's his kind of like fatal flaw. He's kind of did any of you see how he sort of unironically endorsed Darth Bane Path of Destruction, that novel, as a guidebook for the Dissonant Right? Well, if you don't know what happened there, basically Darth Bane murdered every other Sith Lord using a nuclear bomb, not a nuclear bomb, but a thought bomb, and he's like, and basically took an apprentice, and I'm like, and he unironically endorsed it as a manual for the alt-right.
I don't really see how. I mean,
is he endorsing his own destruction? I mean,
maybe
that's kind of what it sounds like.
Maybe he's endorsing, okay, we're going to murder Nick Fuentes in his sleep along with all of his associates, and then I'm going to betray everybody I liked. I'm going to hire Mossad to do it, and then I'm going to take Soph. You know who Soph is, right?
Yeah.
And she will be my apprentice.
Yeah, that's really creepy. Did he actually say that?
No, he didn't say that. This is me coming up with...
No, but I mean the Darth Bane thing.
Yeah, he said that.
That's really interesting. I'm pretty familiar with that novel. That's definitely one of my favorite expanded universe novels, and I would never consider using it as a political model. Because, I mean, all what he accomplishes is he destroys everything that is on his side, so that he can go into hiding, and eventually, at some point in the future, when someone on his side is going to take power because reasons, and that ends up being Palpatine, but that's sort of retroactive lore, right? I think clearly Palpatine is the model, not Darth Bane. I mean, Darth Bane is. I mean, the book is called Path of Destruction. Like he literally wipes out the
new
entire Sith Order for his own benefit, which I guess is in line with what Spencer wants to do.
Okay,
that,
so this would be kind of funny. Spencer went into an Israeli military base, stole a sword that has a beam of energy, and then walked up to Nick Fuentes and stabbed him through the chest with it.
I mean, that's basically what he's implying there, because there's no other way to interpret that. If that book is your model for right-wing action, would it say kill everyone else in your movement and take all the power for yourself?
What if it's something like the old guard, the old outer parties need to die in order for something more far right to emerge out of the ashes?
Here's the thing: if the new outer party is 100 times smaller than the one that came before it, that's like taking maybe, even if it's more efficient, it's like taking one step forward and 100 steps back.
There is something to that, though. That might be a valid interpretation that isn't so. Because that is effectively what happens, and we do need to do that. The outer party needs to be destroyed, and this is a very delicate process, I think, because we have to simultaneously destroy and create in some sense. I'm not really sure how this is going to be.
Yeah, I see a lot of people who say we should destroy the Republican Party. I don't see that happening. I don't see the GOP going the way of the Whigs. Because
I think it can happen in an implicit way. I don't think the Republican Party as an institution would cease to
exist. Yes, but we have to get
sort of have a circulation of elite.
Yeah, get rid of the current platform and the people who are in charge of it. Definitely. And I used to be sort of in a I used to, back when I was more of a libertarian, I thought everybody was controlled by the Rothschilds and international finance, and every world leader kind of had a sort of satanic ritual before he got inaugurated. Now I'm not that schizo, but I think what we need to do with the outer party. I've already seen an example of this. Paul Gosar, Representative Paul Gosar, I believe he's followed several dissident right-wing people on Twitter, and like, for example, Orwell and Good, I believe he's followed Architectural Revival. I believe he follows Pete Dabrowski. I think he might even follow Nick Fuentes, and he's a freaking congressman. And I'm like, we need to, like, figure out we need our billionaire bankroll donors who can serve as a financial who can serve as financial backing for our destruction of the Republican Party, and maybe democracy isn't an end goal. It isn't, but like it's a means to an end. And
this is, like I mentioned earlier, we need to get into politics because that's where the money is, and if we want to sort of breach that wall of people donating money to us, it has to be done via politics. And
the thing is, we can't be like complete retards and do what Paul Nealon did, or oh my god, how long ago was that? I don't remember. Was it like 2016? Was it 2018 when Paul Nealon ran for Congress? And
I don't know who Paul Nealon is.
He was he had a shit ton of endorsements from people like Coulter, Bannon, etc. This was back when Bannon was in the White House.
I think it was 2018.
Okay, and then he was running, and then he unironically showed a photo of himself reading Culture Critique by Kevin MacDonald, and then eventually...
Ooh.
And
yeah, I mean, these people, they just can't resist just showing off how based and red-pilled they are, I guess, and it always gets them...
I think the best way to avoid that is to, like, if you're gonna show off that you're based and red-pilled, only do it to, like, anonymous friends on Discord or something.
Yeah.
I really think if I were to run for office, I'd probably have a YouTube channel or some shit where I, like, do daily live streams of me talking to people, and I'd probably hide my based level or my power level through irony, and I
don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't like irony.
Okay, so first off, a lot of congressmen are starting to adopt the podcast model. Like the Freedom Caucus and Liberty Caucus both have their own little podcasts. I know Ted Cruz has his own little podcast. This is not exactly a new thing, but you can't just be like, all right, I'm gonna start up a YouTube channel as a second life. I'm totally not Senator Right Cafe. I'm just some rando on the internet. Now here is my critique of democracy.
Yeah, I unironically think that we can actually be very based in red pill depending on who we talk to and how we construct it. Like, leftists, they will never argue in good faith and will assume you're a neo-Nazi immediately. But I don't think every right-winger in the country is a sort of person who's guaranteed to argue in bad faith and want to ruin your life. I'm sure someone probably would, like Charlie Kirk or Hunter Avallone would probably collaborate with but like I think most people in the American right aren't like sort of malicious and out to get you. They might not even know who you are, like your movement. And I think optics is better when you're dealing with people within your in-group and not necessarily your out-group. With your out-group, you don't really do anything to them at all. You don't really engage with them.
One way around this problem, and this is going back to web subversion, how the covert communists operated, is they would basically speak in code even in private, so that no matter where a conversation was occurring, it was always completely benign in what they were doing. So even if there was some sort of betrayer or something in the group, no one could really ever be pinned down for anything, because just examined at the surface level, you just sort of see completely normal conversations happening. So that's a potential way to get around this problem. As far as dealing with the outer party goes, or the Republicans, the way I kind of think of this, it's not so much shifting the Overton window to the right, so much as pushing the Republicans out of the Overton window, and that will cause the party to fragment. This is something I think the Fuentes people tried to attempt and are still attempting to some degree. I think if you can actually get sort of based and red-pilled people in sort of the inside of the party infrastructure, what that'll basically do, it won't move the Overton window so much as it will push the Republicans further and further outside of it, which will at some point force it to reorganize itself, if only for donor interest to stay within inside the Overton window, and that might be a means by which it can sort of be chipped away at, rather than and then at that point is when the Overton window would actually shift, if you could sort of trigger the party to reorganize around a new concept.
Yeah, I think this is a new concept. That's a really on point word, because have either of you heard of my theory? I used to call it the virgin state theory. Now I call it the virgin power structure theory. Basically, the idea is once a sort of organization, nation, government, system, any system becomes very old and refined, it's hard to fundamentally change it because it's been dead set in its ways for a while. That's why fundamentally changing the U.S. would be a lot easier in, say, 1790 than in 2018. You can't fundamentally... even though the U.S. doesn't really have a national identity, we, at least on a surface level, seem to have an identity, even like liberalism. We could have changed that if they attempted to do it in the founding of the United States. But now we're kind of solidified. That magma that was the U.S. political identity and ethnic identity is kind of hardened. And the idea is that if, assuming we were to get, like, say, a new power structure of sorts, like a new nation state, we probably wouldn't lead it first. I think we can both agree on that, right?
Yeah, I mean, none of us here would be, I would imagine.
But the idea is when there's a shit ton of vacancies, and this, let's say, a nation state in the Midwest breaks off from the U.S. circa 2050, and the military is too brown to deal with it. I think that's the perfect opportunity to rush to the Capitol and attempt to get in.
That's just way too LARPy for me. You lost me.
No, I seriously, the military is actually weaker than you think. They have a recruitment crisis right now, to the point where most of the young people are not fit for it, and they're starting to have a short supply of new recruits. And the recruits that they're getting, they're complaining that they aren't really competent enough to deal with training. So the idea is, with 2060 demographics, the military, which is made up of young people, so it's probably even worse demographically than the nation as a whole, that military will be kind of ineffective, you know? They won't have...
But the people that the military draw on are, I guess, you said yourself, kind of incompetent or physically unable to do it. The people who are boogalooing the government are the rejects.
Well, so you have this problem where you can't even kick out the government, right? Like, if you did a boogaloo on Washington, it's not like the Congress people are all in Congress and you could just walk in and tell them the GTFO. Or the same thing with the White House, right? For the most part, things aren't even run from these centers of power, these symbolic centers of power. So I'm not even sure how you would do like a 1,000,000-man march to evict the government, because it like where they even are is kind of questionable.
Well, I'm not talking about evicting the government. I'm talking about, okay, everything from Ohio to Reno kind of leaves the Union, and the military would be kind of too sort of diverse to like effectively deal with it. And I think if the economy was collapsing at that point, they might not even have the financial resources to do it. They might not have enough money to hire UN mercenaries. I don't see the United States staying... Like, I don't see it not fragmenting by the time I'm in my grave. I don't see it having the same borders on a continental level. And the idea of the virgin state theory is that something would pop out of that. It would be liquefied. And if that nation state were to survive, the more time that it exists and you're not trying to get into the government, the more solid it gets. It's sort of like a identity that hasn't been hardened and hasn't gotten old and can be changed. And
Well, it's definitely true that a new state is more malleable than an old. I mean, like in 1790, they threw out the Articles of Confederation and formed a completely new government. And I think that's really possible when people sort of trust the elites, not only when it's a young nation, but also when there's sort of a public trust in the leadership. But I mean, I guess the problem with this line of thinking is, I mean, I agree that there's a possibility of the U.S. fragmenting in some way in the 21st century. I mean, that's a completely reasonable possibility. The question of when and where is so vague that devoting much intellectual activity to it kind of feels LARPy and not very productive.
I agree, but it's more like it's sort of a front that you can devote maybe 1% of your time to. And the other, 99% will probably make up the stuff so 1% to 5% will be on sort of LARPy stuff, 20% will be on connections, 20% would be on economic investment, 40% would be on political sort of machinations, 15% would be on everything else. And I think the idea is that the dissident right doesn't focus on multiple different fronts, even some that aren't really trivial but might have a high amount of reward later on. And
that's definitely fair. I mean, if I were in Virginia last year, I definitely would have put some thought into, what would I actually do if something serious happened here. So, there are cases. I guess it's worth thinking about a little bit, but only a little bit.
I agree. LARPing can be pretty good for your mental health. Sometimes I like to escape the sort of monotonous neoliberal imperium we live in, and like to envision myself as like a local noble who owns 1/3 of Mars in the neo-reactionary space empire. Led by the immortal God King, led by an immortal God King. I don't know who that would be, but basically he would have a suit on that would give random immortality that would be programmed by Mencius Mulbug, whose brain was put into a computer.
Yeah, I mean, I won't pretend I haven't indulged in such fantasies myself to break up the blackpilling monotony. So, I mean, I'm definitely not against just having a bit of fun in your imagination space. That's completely fine.
All right.
Probably healthy even.
Yeah, I think that, let me think. I think another issue is the black pill. If you let it affect you too much, you start to get, the combined and intense amount of the black pill with no, sort of nothing to break it up, and the lockdown, and, sooner or later you're kind of gonna be you're gonna want to jump off of a building,
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually feel black-pilled at all. I know some people do, but I mean, I think for our part, we have sort of amazing opportunities for building in front of us. I think it's really, if you look at it the right way, it's a very white-pilling situation to be in because, we sort of have really long-term purpose to dedicate ourselves to if we really want to, and that's pretty cool to be able to do, honestly. I mean, it's not something, if you're a bug man, you're never going to be able to have that kind of meaning in your life, I guess. So I think there's a lot of white pilling at being a dissident.
Hey, the biggest white pill of all is that God is on our side. I mean, it's true. I don't.
Yeah, I hesitate to say things.
Well, okay, so I think one of the reasons why people are so black-pilled is they assume the status quo will always be the status quo. You don't see something like coronavirus coming out of the woodwork. You don't see coronavirus times 10 coming around the woodwork. If you assume that all of the supply chains are going to run hunky-dory forever, and that all of these relationships, the international community's relationship with with big business and the UN and yada yada yada. Global Homo is just turning away. We didn't see coronavirus coming. We probably won't see the next great catastrophe or economic downturn coming or whatever.
It'll probably
status quo.
It'll probably come by the time we graduate college.
Yeah, but at some point the status quo is going to be challenged, and I don't know if that chaos will come something different. What we've seen during the coronavirus is, I guess it's kind of like a trial almost. All of these leaders have been tried. Different government programs are being tried. I guess certain economic arrangements are being questioned. I don't know. It's a very interesting time, and out of, I guess, this chaos can come something, hopefully a little bit more hard right.
Yeah, definitely. We're almost done, but because it's about to approach 9 o'clock. But I think that one thing we have to. I think partially the reason a lot of people might become black-pilled is because, quite frankly, modernity isn't exciting. There's nothing fundamentally new or earth-shattering that's like... No great revelation. It's not like we've discovered America. Modernity is kind of every sort of problem, every sort of, like, mystery has seemingly been solved. And I could see why somebody would be kind of bored with the situation we live in.
Well, I mean, I was listening to a Jonathan Bowden speech a little while ago, and he brought up the point that, I guess, the sort of leftist ethos is just kind of mindless consumption. Liberate the individual from the man and from all of your duties, and then what do you have? You just have this slug-like existence. But on the other hand, you have, I guess, the right-wing impulse for duty, for higher meaning, for higher allegiances than the atomized individual. And there's something. He said that there's something sexy about it that kind of attracts men of action. And I guess part of the purpose of the project of the dissident right is to find those men of action and to find, I guess, creative people, creative individuals to start making content, and you want to find very social people to start organizing with. And out of this, something new will happen. Something new will come out. I'm not sure what it is.
What are you talking about? The only thing you need to do is consume product by Funko Pop and Coom.
Well, we definitely know that the status quo won't maintain itself. So if you are black-pilled because of the status quo, I mean, that's guaranteed to change, right? I mean, there's no way you can know about anything in human history and not recognize that the status quo is inevitably going to change. So,
although I think
if you're worried about,
there are some people in this right who seemingly disagree with that statement. They think that globalization and interconnectivity of people has kind of solidified the situation we live in, and obviously that's wrong. But a lot of people think that it's kind of think that our chance at success sailed a long time ago, and that we're gonna like become sort of like Brazil sort of scenario worldwide. That it's kind of depressing. I don't know how I could live myself if I was eternally black-pilled and thought that the status quo wouldn't change.
Being black-pilled is like being Fukuyama at the end of the Cold War and proclaiming the end of history. Liberal democracy has won. Let's all rejoice under U.S. hegemony. Well, that didn't happen.
Speaking of hegemony, do you really hate how a lot of people in this right are like promoting Chinese hegemony?
You mean like Keith Woods types? Promoting the Chinese authoritarian models of government?
I mean, I guess neo-mercantilism can work, but like China isn't just neo-mercantilism. It's a fucking horrible regime. And I get it. Authoritarianism and totalitarianism isn't inherently bad, but I would rather live in the U.S. with its ideological mediocrity than China.
Well, China's kind of unironically fash, though.
Yeah.
If you're rather fash,
yes,
you can kind of sympathize with Chinese fash.
I mean, I am a fascist, but the thing is, the issue of China is that, like, if you look at some corporate executive in China, he fails to meet his annual quota, and he has to do walking push-ups across the building saying, "I'm sorry." That sort of
A true man of action.
also like they're not sanitary. They never have. They're not a benevolent dictatorship. They're not like it's not like if Antonio Salazar was in charge of the world's largest nation. They're not like they really only they're imperialist as well. They would sooner probably don't want you in your country. I know Nick Land lives in Shanghai right now, but Chinese hegemony, although U.S. hegemony is pretty bad as well, Chinese hegemony I think will be just slightly worse, but in a different sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want China at all. I don't really understand how any West does. I mean, like you said, neo-mercantilism can work. I mean, I think most Western people would be fine with if it was like the 18th century British Empire. The world was sort of an empire of giant corporations that weren't contrary to the national well-being of the nation they were in. I mean, that would be pretty fine. But and there was a sort of market freedom and the ability to self-actualize, but that doesn't exist in China at all. It's just a giant slave nation, basically.
Yeah, corporations are basically tied to the state as well. Like most corporations have really deep ties to the government. Like, doesn't PUBG I forgot who made PUBG? Was it Tencent?
It might be Tencent. I don't know.
But they have deep connections with the Chinese government.
Yeah, I mean that's true for tons of video games, like Riot Games. Who does League of Legends? They're basically owned by China, and I mean, the amount of influence China has over the media in the United States is completely unacceptable. It's hard to imagine. Like if you tried to explain this to someone who was 100 years ago, or even 50, they probably
they couldn't comprehend.
Wouldn't even. Yeah, like they would have no like. I don't even know how to analogize this in history. Like imagine Carthage owning 90% of the shares, I don't know, Roman Empire Corp or something. It doesn't make any sense. It beggars belief to anyone who doesn't live in the modern world.
And imagine
to kind of take the side of sort of Keith Woods, you have China forcing Hollywood to erase some of its more gay characters. And
what the F?
erase some of their subversion.
I love China now. No, I don't. But
that's pretty funny though. I mean, I definitely respect China sort of rejecting global homo.
Yeah, I think we're gonna. I can't wait till a neo-reactionary space empire implements a entertainment inquisition, and okay, Hollywood or like the West Coast in general. Once we reclaim Earth, would be kind of decimated. We would get the Starforge from Star Wars. We'll build up a fleet, and we basically destroy the entirety of the West Coast through cannon fire. And we would like lock all these sort of global homo movies in sort of like a vault, and then lose the key accidentally. I guess we throw it into a volcano. And yeah, okay. Holy shit! I just realized I was LARPing, and
well, I mean. Wasn't it Nick Land who said Neo China arrives from the future?
Yeah, he loves
meltdown.
That.
I don't know. It's kind of funny.
So yeah, this is going on for an hour. I started at 8. It's 9:05. So this concludes the first episode of the Rightcast. I can see that I gained about. Let me check. About 8 subs in the live stream, so thank you all for coming. This is the Rightcast signing out. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.